A little less than a year ago, I started making critique videos for each game in the Final Fantasy XIII series, which took me about a couple months to do. I then moved on to a few different games that I wanted to play, and while making videos for those, I noticed my Lightning Returns video was performing quite well for such a small channel like mine, so thank you for all the interest and support in that video. For that, I wanted to follow up with a video on another Final Fantasy game because that's the YouTube life, and I chose Final Fantasy X. Now, I've never played this one before. I got into Final Fantasy playing the modern titles like 15 and 7 Remake, and I was never too eager to play 10 since it seemed a bit too old school for me. But now that I'm at a more recent Final Fantasies to play, I finally got around to it, so let's talk about it. So the story of Final Fantasy X begins in the city of Zanarkand, where our main protagonist, Tidus, yes, I'm calling him Tidus because Tidus sounds as dumb as he looks. He's a hotshot blitzball player competing in a game organized to honor his dad who disappeared 10 years ago. And suddenly a huge wave enters and destroys the city caused by a force known as Sin. Amid all the chaos, Tidus gets sucked into a portal and ends up in the world of Spira 1,000 years later. A world where his home Zanarkand has been in ruins ever since. Here, he gets acquainted with the other main characters including Wakka, Lulu, Chimera, and Yuna, who is a summoner. Summoners are individuals who go on a pilgrimage, a sacred journey across Spira to various temples, completing trials in order to acquire Aeons, which are summons. The goal is to obtain the final Aeon strong enough to defeat Sin, who has been wreaking havoc on Spira for centuries. During their pilgrimage, summoners are also accompanied and protected by their guardians, which would be the other characters I've mentioned, and Tidus decides to tag along on its journey, eventually becoming a guardian himself. That's the setup for Final Fantasy X, and I dig it. I like stories where the overall plot is the protagonist having to gradually gain more power, become stronger in order to take on the main villain, which is a whale here. Now, I just came off of Final Fantasy XIII, which to my knowledge is quite a controversial entry, while 10 is one that's highly regarded. So I went into this game thinking if I like 13, this is gonna be phenomenal. And that is not what happened at all. Yeah, I'm just gonna say it right now, this game was not it. Where do I even begin? Let's start with the combat. So, I've gotten so used to the combat in Final Fantasies be like and the combat in 10's like yeah, the combat's turn-based. You hit the enemy and then they hit you, and I just never really liked the concept of it. I find it so awkward when everyone's just standing there taking each other's attacks. Like Tidus and Wakka can swim their asses off in a game of blitzball, but they can't swim to the side when some barrels are dropping on them in the water. I mean, the characters do dodge at random based on their evasive stats, which is definitely nice. Like, haha, I'm gonna attack twice now without getting hit, but I wish it was actually me reacting to the attack. The combat's really basically just assigning characters to make an attack each turn and healing whenever you need to. It doesn't require any complex strategy. Whenever there's a flying enemy, command Wakka to attack it because he can throw his ball. Like, come on. Dodge. See an enemy vulnerable to magic? Switch to Lulu because she's a black mage. I just found this system to be so simple and unengaging. There are a couple bosses that make the combat a little more interesting. Like the Crawler, for example, is an enemy that takes a lot of damage against magic attacks. But it has this little floating device that prevents you from using magic, so you gotta have Wakka temporarily take it down, giving you a few turns to go all in with magic attacks. However, you also gotta take some time making sure your party's healed up before it does this really powerful attack. So you know, I see the appeal, but it's never gonna be a matter of, oh, sometimes I'm feeling turn-based combat and other times I'm feeling something a little more action-oriented. No, I 100% prefer action games. But that's just me though, and I'll probably be saying that a lot in this video. So I'm not too crazy about the combat, but what about the story? I did say I like the overall premise of it, however, it starts slow. Painfully slow. Once Tidus is in Spira, it's a flat fish out of water story for a couple hours. He's getting to know the characters and they're providing some exposition to him about the world, and it is absolutely... It also didn't help that none of the characters were grabbing my attention, like in Final Fantasy XIII. The story in that game doesn't make any sense at the beginning, but as soon as it starts, boom, lightning, super hot, super badass. It was love at first sight, you know what I'm saying? And then look at all these bozos.
Hey, whoa!
I hate lightning!
You hate what? Yeah, all these characters are goofy. Except for Ornn. He's pretty cool. He was a guardian for Yuna's dad back in the day, along with Titus's dad, and the three of them actually defeated Sin together. But once he joins the gang, he reveals to Titus that his dad is now Sin. Like, what? Yeah, I feel like this game starts picking up once the cast leaves Luca after all the Blitzball stuff, and this man becomes Yuna's guardian as well. But that's not saying that I enjoyed the story from here on. No, this is where I just started seeing potential. The thing is, this game doesn't answer the biggest questions it presents until the very end. Like, how did Titus end up in Spira 1,000 years later from where the story begins? What's the backstory with Sin? How did Titus's dad become Sin? You don't find out until the last couple hours of this 40-hour experience. Until then, the game fills the time with less interesting plot lines like dealing with this clown who plans to save Spira by destroying it so Sin wouldn't have anything left to destroy. What the f- What'd I tell you, these characters are goofy. I wish I could say that at least I had the gameplay to keep me entertained, but running around fighting monsters take a majority of the gameplay, and I've already established that I'm not really a fan of the combat. Okay, but what about when the game shakes things up a little? When you reach the temples, there's puzzles to solve which acts as the trials needed to be completed to obtain the Aeons. Well, they suck too! There's nothing fun about fondling a bunch of balls. That's just me though. But like, what the hell am I playing? I thought this was Final Fantasy X. Or is this Final Fantasy 13? Because that would actually make a lot of sense. Ooh. Go ahead and drop a dislike. I have no regrets. In all seriousness though, I guess this game just didn't age very well and I don't have the benefit of nostalgia. I don't know, you guys tell me what I'm not seeing. I could just be an absolute moron. And you know what I hate the most about this game? Here's the first time I died. I found the combat so boring, I was so out of it, I didn't bother healing when I should have, and the next thing I knew, I was dead. Then I was like, alright, I should probably focus up a little more here. But then the game took me to the main menu, and I was like, wait, what? Yeah, so when you die, you're brought to the main menu and have to load your last save, ideally, and play from there, and it is f***ing stupid. The combat may be dull to me, but it could also be challenging at times, and I had to play this repetitious game for hours more than I needed to because of this bullcrap design. Sure, I'm an ignorant zoomer. This is how most games were back in the day, but that doesn't make it any less irritating. Look, I like the presence of risk when there's punishment for failing, but this is not how it should be done. Look at Lightning Returns for instance. The basic concept of that game is you're thrown into an open world with 13 in-game days to save as many souls as you can. There's constantly a timer, and if you lose a fight, it's actually not game over. You keep going, but an hour is deducted from the time you have left. The game penalizes you organically. It plays into an actual mechanic in the game. Final Fantasy X just makes you go back to the last time you saved and redo all the progress you made after that. This could include the time you spent going into the spear grid to upgrade your characters, the time you explored around opening chests, all the XP you gained from battling enemies, gone. Seriously, like what will I learn by having to redo all of this because I lost one battle that was irrelevant to everything else? You're just wasting my time. And to be fair, the save points are spaced out appropriately for the most part. I can tell they tried not to have this design be too annoying. Like there's usually a save not too long before and after a boss battle. I admit, sometimes when I lost a lot of progress, it was completely on me for not saving. But other times, it's not. Each save may not be too far away from the next, but it may feel like it sometimes because you're often stopped by battles which are random encounters. Every few steps you take, you get into a battle, which I also don't like because again, I don't like the combat, and this could accumulate to a good 30 to 45 minutes of running and battling, and just as you're about to reach the next save, you lose a fight. Whatever the circumstances may be, you would lose half an hour of progress because you lost one fight that would have only taken a few extra minutes if you were able to just retry that battle. It's so frustrating. And here's another stupid design choice that was made. You can't skip cutscenes. So let's say there's a boss battle you're having trouble with, but you saved right before. Well, if there's like a 5 to 10 minute cutscene before that boss fight, which usually is the case, you're still gonna have to rewatch that same cutscene every time you need to retry. And this is the HD remaster version of the game. Come on, Square Enix, why didn't you implement a skip cutscene option in your remaster, you square? Again, you're just wasting my damn time. I just don't get it. I can't tell you how many times I just wanted to quit playing this game. If I didn't want to make this video articulating how flawed this game is, I wouldn't have experienced it to the end. Not even close. But I did. I forced myself through this game, and thankfully, there was some payoff. As I said, the answers to the mysteries start coming towards the end, along with some twists and turns, and it's actually pretty good. After experiencing this whole story, I want to say this is my favorite story in a Final Fantasy game so far. This game really woke me up during its last 6 hours, give or take. It wasn't even just the story, all the bosses towards the end of the game also provoked me to utilize the combat system to a greater extent, so battling was actually kind of fun. For instance, I was having a hard time defeating this dragon because it kept using Kirasaga healing itself for 9999. So I was like, alright, how do I beat this thing? And one trick is you can cast Reflect on it, which is a spell you would typically cast on yourself to deflect magic attacks back at enemies. But by casting it on this dragon, not only wasn't it able to heal itself anymore when it tried, the health went towards my characters. And at that moment, I was like, oh, got you. I was actually having positive emotions playing this. I thought, alright Final Fantasy X, if you keep this up until the credits roll, I'm gonna say you were worth playing. Which was being very generous because 6 hours is only a fraction of this game. But it was not done with its bullshit. In fact, it saved its biggest for last. So at a particular point within these 6 hours, I saved right before a boss battle. I ran up these stairs, defeated the boss. It wasn't too bad, but it took some time like any boss battle. Then I reached a new area. This is the home stretch to the finale, and the enemies here were tough. They weren't anything I couldn't handle, but battling them was time consuming. Like, look at this annoying piece of shit. It wasn't very strong, but it kept inflicting status ailments on my characters, preventing them from attacking. Look at this fat bruh. This thing is so tanky it made Auron, who's a beast of a heavy hitter, seem inadequate. I was fighting very resilient enemies here for a good 20 minutes, and then I ran into this behemoth. Again, nothing I couldn't handle, but after I defeated it, it dropped the meteor and annihilated my characters who were all decent on health. There was no save after that boss battle, so I had to load my game prior to it. Why is this game doing this to me? How the f was I supposed to know it's gonna do that? I mean, it does say it retaliates with Meteor when defeated, which I didn't initially notice, but even if I did, I wouldn't have f***ing anticipated it was gonna wipe out my whole team that was good on health. The closest thing I've seen to this are these f***ing Ghastlies who self-destruct if you don't kill them fast enough. But it would only explode on one of your characters, taking just a chunk of their health. Here, this thing died. I killed it. And the game's like, oh, you won your battle? Well, how about you die and then go all the way back to that boss battle? No, suck my Final Fantasy X. I have seen people praise this game while losing it shitting on Final Fantasy XIII. Final Fantasy XIII is never nearly on this level of bullshit. I would kinda get it if 10 was just so much more fun than 13, but it's not. You know what? I'ma say it. 13's better than 10. It's not even close, and I'm not even kidding. Drop a dislike. I will never, ever see that shit. 13's trash, but 10's a classic. What a fucking joke. So I redid all that and eventually reached the final boss, handled it, and I was very conflicted afterwards because as I mentioned, the story is really strong towards the end and it wrapped up perfectly. The ending is gold. It's beautiful, it's emotional, or whatever. If I wasn't already so mad at this game, I would have cried. You know when someone tells a joke that's actually pretty good, but you try not to laugh because you don't like that person? Yeah, it was kind of like that. So in the end, I think Final Fantasy X would have been a solid TV show. It has a pretty darn good story. I will cherish that ending, but playing the game was both dreadful and infuriating. To me, it's more important for video games to excel in their gameplay rather than its narrative because playing them is where a majority of the time is spent. The positives were heavily overshadowed by the negatives here. I have platinumed every Final Fantasy game I've played so far, but I have no intentions putting several more hours 100%ing this one. If this game ever gets a remake treatment like 7, you know, make it an action RPG, fix all the bullshit design, I think I would love it as much as many people already do. Playing 10 has shown me that no Final Fantasy game is really the black sheep of the franchise. This is a franchise that has been gradually changing with each entry over the past few decades, and it's just a matter of what certain individuals prefer. Final Fantasy X isn't really my cup of tea, but that's just me. If you're a fan, I'm glad you like it. Truly. If you think it's better than 13, much respect. But 13 isn't objectively garbage. Come on. For some, 13 is their genuine favorite. I've seen it right here on my channel, and if 13 is garbage, then 10's also garbage. See ya.